when I was graduating from undergraduate school, I was really looking for a career, not a job. In the retailing industry, and doing my research, was a place where companies were willing to invest in you as a person, as an executive, where they had great training programs. And the other piece was they seemed very interesting to me because it was going to challenge so much of what I had worked either through internships or through my studies, from marketing, finance, management, merchandising, pretty much all the components of business that was very attractive to me. And after doing the research, it presented itself, and I did look at a number of programs. I looked at whether it be Procter & Gamble, I looked at Macy's, I looked at Bloomingdale's, and settled on Macy's at that point, and it did not let me down. It was an environment that they were willing to invest in training and developing the individual. They were spending their time and money to make sure that they fostered an environment of collaboration and education, and they expected a lot in return. But it really did challenge all the different senses of the business environment. So very attractive to me. My advice is pretty simple and pretty straightforward on this dimension. Do your work, do your homework, bring your A game. I constantly talk about this, is that there is no excuse to show up to meetings, to show up to any interaction with folks. There's enough information out there to do research. When I was starting, it was probably a little bit more difficult to find the research. There is no excuse. People have invited you to the table for a reason. When you're at the table, bring your A game, do your research. You're there for a reason. People want to hear from you, whether it's that you're newly involved in something or you have the experience. But what you have is a perspective and a point of view that is typically welcome. And if not, then I blame it on the people who brought you to the table. So my advice to people who want to be leaders are come prepared, be present, and engage. And I find that people who are around the table and are not engaged, not that interesting to me. So that advice I can give you. And the other thing is listen and observe. And a lot of people say listen. I'm a big believer in the visual impact of what your eyes can tell you, that words may not be as articulate as your observations. And there's a great company, IDEO, that I've done a lot of work with out on the West Coast, and they observe consumers more than they just ask consumers. And you can see a lot of consumers not being satisfied by certain things, which allows you an opportunity to create solutions for. So. I don't like superlatives, so the term biggest would be putting a lot of pressure on one challenge. I think the challenges that are on retail existed when I started. They've existed through my 30 years of doing this, and they exist today. Retailing is a challenging environment. I used to joke that it was very Darwinian, survival of the fittest, and the challenge to me has not changed dramatically. It's that how do we, as retailers or as business leaders, how do we satisfy consumer demands? And nothing's changed much, and you have to satisfy them through product. You have to satisfy them through an experience. You have to satisfy them through value, and that does not mean price. Price is one dimension of value, and nothing has changed. The consumer demands a certain amount for spending their time or their money. And as great merchants, or as good merchants and as good business people, our job is to recognize opportunities as they exist through listening to consumers, or even more importantly, through observing consumers, because they can tell you a certain amount of things, but through observation, they can show you what they're not being satisfied with. So to me, nothing's changed, or everything's changed. How we connect with the consumer has changed, but the objective of finding an opportunity to connect with the consumer has not changed. And something that I feel strongly about, my dad owned a shoe store when I was a kid, one shoe store in Worcester, Massachusetts, and I worked in the stockroom during that period on Saturdays. And I'll never forget, I might have been 8 or 9, and it was before any child issues with working at that age. But I would get a Friendly's hamburger out of the deal if I worked on Saturdays. Is that I asked him once, I said, "What time do we close the store, Dad?" And he said to me, "When the last customer leaves." And so that has stayed with me. Nothing's changed. Connecting with the consumer, that's the biggest challenge in satisfying their needs, or even anticipating what their needs are in advance and figuring out how to fill that space.